So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Joni Valerio. I am based in New Jersey in the United States, living right outside of New York City. I am currently, well, I have for my entire 30 plus year career been working for the same big pharma company. The company is Merck, as we will be discussing some of the products that I've been working on, so you will be able to figure it out. Um, I am a chemical engineer by degree and by training. So I have a bachelor's of science in chemical engineering from Lehigh University. A shout out to Sherry and Arlene, two of my sorority sisters, who I see are online supporting me. Thank you. And then I have a master's of science in chemical engineering from the University of Virginia. And right after that was when I joined Merck, and I've been working with the same company at various different sites in many different roles for about the last 30 years. And I am just thrilled to be able to share some of my experiences with you, share some advice, things I've learned along the way. So hopefully it can keep you from making some of the same mistakes that I have made, if you want to call them mistakes, in my career. Learn things a little sooner and answer any questions you might have. Is that
Brilliant.
long enough, Dion? Did
Thank
I
you,
cover for you?
Joni. Now we've got people joining us now. What's happened, and I must apologise for anybody who's watching this live. We've had slight technical difficulties with Zoom that allows us to join. We've got to invite everybody from our previous Zoom link to come over to this link to watch on YouTube. So there's going to be a little bit of a lag. So Joni, while we fill in this lag for other people joining us today, can you have you done anything like this before, live streaming like this? We're going to do a bit of filler activity. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, so no, I have never live streamed, but one thing we will be speaking about later on in our talk, I believe, Dion, is the advantages of working for a large company, which I do work for, versus a small company. Although I've never done anything live streaming, I am a certified Toastmaster, and that is an opportunity that a large company provides you. They have a lot of different in-house training from external parties as well as internal parties. And I think had I not worked for such a large company, I never would have had the opportunity to become a certified Toastmaster, which is a public speaking certification where you present modules and learn how to speak publicly. Excuse me for just one moment. My phone, I need to put it on shut up. Okay.
So while you're doing that, I'm just going to say a huge shout outs to people who've hopped over. Well done for catching that link, hopping over to join us here. The joys of technology not cooperating. So let's, perhaps Joni, again, for those people who are just joining us right now, can you tell us again who you are, where you're from, and just a bit of a reiteration, because there were only about 3 people watching online when you first said that a few minutes ago.
Okay, so very briefly, I am from the United States. I live outside of New York City. I've had a 30 plus year career with a large pharmaceutical company called Merck, as you will learn. My education is a bachelor's of science in chemical engineering from Lehigh University in Pennsylvania, and of which my 2 sorority sisters are here. So thank you, both of you.
They've made it over to the new link.
Science in chemical engineering from the University of Virginia, and then a 30-year career with Merck.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Now we've well done to everybody who's made it over to the new link. Joni, now you worked as a chemical engineer on some really, really interesting drug projects, haven't you? You've worked on the AIDS drug, drugs for Parkinson's, oncology drugs, even gunshot wound drugs. Do you want to tell us a little bit about those and how you got into that?
Right. So, Merck is a pharmaceutical company, and in joining a pharmaceutical company, that's what you do. You make pharmaceuticals. Most of my career, I would say the vast majority has been spent actually making the powder that gets compressed into the tablets, not actually making the tablets themselves. Some of the drugs that I've had the opportunity to work on and help improve the lives and health of many people in the US and worldwide. The first drug I worked on is still on the market. It is called Primaxin. It is a sterile drug, means it is injected into your veins. It is a combination of two drugs, one called cilastatin and one called imipenem. And that, as you referred to, Dion, is the drug of choice in emergency rooms for gunshot wounds because it is a large spectrum antibiotic. So I thought that was really cool. In 1993, 94, I was assigned to a team to design a plant for a drug, which we didn't know what it was called. It's now called Crixivan. It was an AIDS drug. It was highly top secret. We couldn't even say that we were working on an AIDS therapy at the time because there was so much political sensitivity around the disease. And that drug has pretty much caused AIDS to become a chronic condition versus a death sentence. 1989, you got AIDS, you're dead. Now, if you get AIDS, it is managed through a variety of antiviral drugs. So, and this one was the first drug that actually had that impact on the disease. And in 2012, I was on a team supporting the actual release of the finished drug that people take for what was known as anti-PD-1. MK3475 was the Merck trade handle for it, and it is now known as Keytruda or pembrolizumab, which is an immunotherapy. It's like it was the new greatest oncology breakthrough in the late teens, and there are many types of immunotherapies for oncology on the market now, but that was the first. And you know, the impact of that drug was absolutely amazing. You know, patients who are in end of life, have 6 months or less to live, are surviving for 5 or more years. Dion, I know I did send you a slide. This might be a good time to show if you, I don't know if you want to, it's a very graphic slide.
Right. I think, yeah, we should put it to the vote. So Joni's described this drug, which is phenomenal, and I've seen the pictures. It's quite graphic of the results it has. Now, I think we've got people watching this live. If you want to see these results, let us know in the chat box. But we're going to be very much led by you because it is graphic, and it could be a little bit shocking to some. So let us know if you're interested in seeing that. Put it in the chat box, and I'll give you warning so that if you aren't interested in seeing it and you want to look away, we'll make a decision shortly. But
let me carry on while the vote, because there are a few other drugs that I did want to talk about, because the one thing you need to realize in working in pharma is that not everything makes it to market. As a matter of fact, far fewer drugs make it to market than actually do. We had 2 drugs that I worked on in the early 2000s. One was called Turinabant, and it was an anti-obesity drug, and it was the coolest thing. The drug acted on the body by making you feel nauseous, just a tiny bit. Okay. And by managing the dosing, it would keep you from eating too much because you wouldn't really feel like eating. That was the premise of how this drug worked. But in clinical trials, it had some central nervous system issues such as anxiety and depression that really caused it not to go forward. But if this drug had gone forward, it would be a game changer, like, what's that drug? The ED drug, whatever, Viagra. You know, it was sort of like it would be a lifestyle drug that would have made a huge difference to a lot of patients, as well as a health drug. We also had a huge cardio drug, MK859. I forget what its generic name was, but again, there were some issues with that. And after more than 10 years of intensive clinical trials and process development, all the work that we do on a drug, eventually the managers at Merck, the executives decided that we were not going to continue that one. So there are a lot of drugs that you can spend a lot of your career on that will never go forward. Wow. So, but you know, again, the Crixivans of this world, the Keytrudas of this world, the Primaxins of this world, that's what we do it for.
Okay, well, I want to let you know, Joni, people have voted to see the results of this oncology drug. Okay. So everybody who's perhaps a little bit squeamish, I would suggest at this point that you pray, because here you go. Do you want to talk us through this?
Sure. Now, so again, this is a slide with a patient who, the baseline, you can see the size of the tumors above his left eye. And this was the very first picture that was taken as he presented originally. After the first course of therapy, you can see in the lower left the difference in the shrinkage of the tumors. This was this is a 31-day cycle. So this was after 1 month of treatment. And then at the end, you can see after 3 cycles of treatment, you can actually see the remarkable difference with no surgery, no resection, nothing. This was just the drug alone at 10 milligrams per kilogram. Typically this drug is given in 31 cycles. So, people will be on this drug for 3 years, but you could see the huge difference. And this is what we do it for this man who was probably less than 6 months to live in the baseline photo. I don't know how long he lived, but, and I do believe this was a man from the UK, if I'm not mistaken, but don't quote me on that. So, those are some of the differences. This is the difference that you can make in pharma.
Great, thank you for that, and apologies for those people who might have found that a little bit too much to handle. Let's move on now. So we've got one question from a gentleman in India. He said, "Are there any anti-tobacco drugs?"
Not that. So there are many different pharmaceutical companies, and each company looks at their business model and decides which types of therapies they wish to target. So at this point, we are not targeting any effects from tar and nicotine. Whatever the effects on the body are specifically. Now, however, lung cancer is an outcome of smoking. So anti-tobacco. You can stretch it a little bit and say that our Keytruda is an anti-tobacco drug because it does impact the long-term effects of smoking. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Desmond. It's great to have a question.
Okay, so now we talked about the impact that you as a chemical engineer can have, but I think for many people, perhaps students at high school, and if we have got any students from high school, do let us know in the chat box if you're watching us from high school or even lower than that. They might not know what is involved in being a chemical engineer. I'll be honest, I didn't really know until we'd had a chat in December what it really entailed. So we're going to talk about that now, aren't we, Joni? But before we do, I'd just like to say, how did you get into chemical engineering? What was your education? Yes, so if you could
thank you.
Go for that, please.
Right, so I didn't know what a chemical engineer did either. So let's everybody join the club. We'll all hold hands and sing Kumbaya, because I don't think anybody really knows what an engineer does. And that's because engineers can do a lot of different things, and that's why engineering is really cool. So engineering, in my opinion, even in and of itself, is problem solving. You're given a problem and you're meant to solve it. And the engineering curriculum, the engineering classes that you take, just teach you approaches to general problem solving. If you're a chemical engineer, you do problem solving with a little chemistry on the side. If you're a mechanical engineer, you do you do engineering with a little bit of mechanics on the side, like dynamics and static stresses and whatnot. If you're an electrical engineer, and I know I have 2 of them, of my friends on the line, it's sort of engineering with electrical stuff, whatever that is, Arlene and Sherry on the side. But we all sort of have the same basis in engineering for approaches to problem solving. And that makes you extremely versatile in your careers, because if you can know how to approach a problem, you can approach any type of problem, whether it's a chemical problem, an electrical problem, a mechanical problem, or not. What if it's a shipping problem? You use those same approaches, and therefore an engineering education makes you very versatile in industry. Oh, how did I get started? That's right. We started in high school. My physics teacher said, you're good in math and science. You should be an engineer. I said, okay, Mr. Weston knows. I said, hey, Ma, Mr. Weston says I should be an engineer. I'm good in math and science. And she said, oh, that's great. They make lots of money. Okay. All right, Mom, we love you, but we're glad for your support. When I went into college, then I found out there were different kinds of engineers, and I had to pick one. I had no idea, so I went to the dean of the college and asked him which one did he, based on my what I'm doing well in and what I'm enjoying, which should I go into? And he said, oh, definitely chemical. Little did I know it was at the time when he had seen his chemical engineering numbers plummet from 100 in a class to about 20. But anyway, that's where I wound up. And I think it was a really great choice for me.
Brilliant. So now let's get on and talk about how you started your career, because that's what lots of people are here to hear about. I'm going to quickly share, because we do talk about drive live with an engineer, and the reason we do it is the storytelling element. So let's have a look at your career as an overview and the different vehicles that perhaps you've metaphorically driven and journeyed along during your career. Let's start off with this first 1 to 10 years where metaphorically you'd be driving a forklift truck. Tell us more about these roles and what were exactly involved in being a plant engineer, a process engineer, or functional support engineer.
Right. So working in the plant, the first 10 years is sort of building a foundation and learning about your industry and learning about how things work. And it's really setting the foundation for your career, and it's teaching you the basis of how do you approach a problem. What are some ground rules that you should always use? You know, coming in, a plant engineer is basically an engineer who works on the floor in a plant and supports. And now again, I'm talking pharma, so we're just going to limit it to that because that's my experience. Who supports the actual processing of chemicals to make a drug. It's a day-to-day job, things that you do. You come in the morning and you talk to the supervisor who's been working all night. He works that night shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And you say, hey, Doug, what happened last night? And he says, we overheated the batch. It wasn't supposed to go up to 100 degrees. It was supposed to go 80 at the most, but the guy was out to lunch. He didn't come back, and the steam was left on to the tank, and the batch got heated up too high. Oh, okay, so that's one thing you have to do. You have to figure out, well, what does this mean? Is the batch still good? Do we have to put it down the sewer? What do we do? How do we assess if the batch is still good, if it's still going to make something that we can sell or not? You know, because pharma is a regulated industry, you have a lot of agency. You have FDA, well, the FDA, the US Food and Drug Administration. I don't know what it's called in the UK or around the world, but the governing bodies that govern and how you have to make your drugs, that give you restrictions upon which you must follow. So then you have to make sure that all of your documentation is correct for how you assessed the quality of the batch, and is it still good, and your decision making to carry forward or not. So those are some things that plant engineers do. When there's a new way of doing a process, you have to make sure it works before you implement it whole hog. So like you are the one on the floor standing by the vessel the first time you make a change, because you never know what's going to happen, and you might have to make take a quick action based on your engineering knowledge. So you're on the floor, you're standing, you're wearing safety glasses, you're wearing big heavy safety shoes. Sometimes you have to suit up and put gloves on, and you really get hands on. Those are a lot of the things that a plant engineer does. The first time they put a new tank in, you're the one that has to make sure, test it out and make sure everything works well. You know, we had one tank where they put a valve in. There's a valve, it's called a check valve. And what it does is it only allows liquid to flow one way. And they had it in backwards. So we couldn't pump the tank out. And we couldn't figure out why we couldn't pump the tank out. The worst thing was this valve was about 20 feet up in the air on a pipeline. And it was February. So here I am in the middle of the night. I had to, we were working shifts. We support, when you're a plant engineer, you will work shifts. I had to shimmy up the ladder and crawl along the pipe until I found where the valve was installed backwards, make sure it was installed backwards. And then in the morning, we sent a mechanic up to change it out. So those are the kinds of things that you do as a plant engineer, but it's awesome. And you not only do you build a foundation of understanding and the application of the engineering principles that you use, but you make friends that you keep forever. 3 o'clock in the morning while you're waiting for a drum to empty and there's nothing going on and you're talking to the guy next to you, you learn things about and make friends that way that you keep for your entire career.
Joni, I think it would be really useful at this point to explain generally what a drug production plant looks like. So I know you've talked about that vat and that valve, but as you talk about these elements, it might be useful just to have a really quick overview of the different elements of a site, for example. And you've also mentioned to me that you have the sites are split for the process for a reason, and I think that would be a good thing to talk about as well.
Okay. Yep. So, one of the things that the pharmaceutical industry does is we do not put an entire process end to end in one place, because if the plant blows up, you lose your entire process. We instead will strategically split it up amongst several sites, and then we will ship. We'll ship from one to the other. So you'll do the first 4. It's like a recipe. Think about a recipe where you mix a couple things together, then you add a couple more things, and then you finally put it in the pan and put it in the oven. So that's sort of how a chemical process works. We use tanks, we use pumps and pipes to move chemicals from one place to another. We use the tanks are stirred, so you can like your KitchenAid mixer, so you can stir things up. They're heated, they're cooled by having a jacket on them that we put hot or cold fluids through. And so that's basically like what a plant looks like. You basically you pump things into a tank, you stir it up, and then you purify it.
Okay.
So that's sort of a general chemical process overview for those who are are in high school and have not quite yet been exposed to chemical processing.
I think another thing we were chatting about was the fact that you would produce some of the less value-added elements of a drug. You might outsource that, and then you might do the more complex things yourself.
That is correct.
And the challenges that perhaps you could explain a little bit more about that. I think that's an interesting.
Sure. Now that does come.
Are we coming to that later? Sorry, I'm messing things up. Sorry.
No, you're not at all. But I'm happy to talk about it.
I'll get back to the program.
Okay. So setting your foundation as a plant engineer, I mean, that is really one of the best places that you can start. From there, you can take on some of the other roles. However, these other roles do hire new engineers directly out of college. All 3 of these roles that you see on the screen, you can be hired directly into. The plant engineer, the process engineer, and the functional support engineer. A process engineer is the one who designs the plants. So that is your hardcore chemical engineering curriculum that you studied while you're in school. It's the only time I have applied my knowledge directly from college into the field, into my role. Other than that, it has been applying what I've learned in a different way. But when doing all those things that you were tested on, you will learn in college. That is about the only place I've actually applied sizing a heat exchanger, for those of you who are chemical engineers in college. And then the third role is a functional support engineer, and they are very important. Those are your subject matter experts. When you are working in a plant, when you are working as a process engineer, you need subject matter experts for things like safety requirements, to make sure that we don't design something that is inherently unsafe, that will blow up, that will corrode. We also need environmental specialists who explain how much can be released to the air, into the water, and to help make sure that the way we're running our processes respects the environment. We also need ergonomics engineers, so people who are specialized in ergonomics. Is this drum too heavy? Do I need to put a lifting device in? So that is another way that you can be involved as a as a functional support engineer, as a specialist in a specific area in the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay, fantastic. That was really useful. Do keep your questions coming in if you're watching this live. If you're watching it on demand, do put your questions in the chat box below and we'll come back to you in due course. Joni, thank you so much. Some great feedback. People saying, I love your passion, Joni. We've had Sambit, who's been talking about the challenge of oral cancer patients in India as a result of smokeless tobacco products. And we hope, you know,
the oral cancer as well is Keytruda does have a lot of indications in head and neck and salivary gland. So that is what we showed you. So there is the same opportunity there for oral cancer and tobacco industry.
Okay. So Sambit, there you go. Maybe you know some people who can look into that for the patients in your country. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so let's moving on now, Joni. So that was the first 1 to 10 years. If you've got chemical engineering graduates or any other engineering graduates coming out of it, you don't have to have a chemical engineering degree to go into pharma engineering. I mean, I think if we look across many of the, you know, I've done drive lives with multiple people. Because you've studied one subject doesn't mean that you are bound to that subject and that discipline for the rest of your life. You can, if you are motivated, quite easily shift function. So let's now talking about the next phase of somebody's career, using your career as an example. And you've always worked for Merck, haven't you?
I have. You know, I used to say, like, you know, I've worked for 32 years, but I started out when I was 10 because I wouldn't admit to anything over 40, but it's just not working anymore. So, but yeah, I started in 1989. So we're coming up on 32 years in June.
Great. So you were talking about the different kind of roles that you could have in this phase of your career, which would be the initiative lead, the business support roles. What role did you take? Perhaps you can talk about your roles in that phase and then the different options of roles that other individuals with different interests might pursue.
Right. So the best example that I can give you is, as you were talking about earlier, Dion, many times in order to make the most use of our facilities that we build and run and the overhead associated with them, we try to focus on the end of the process of a chemical process in making a drug. The reason is that's where your biggest value is. You know, when you have some of the earlier steps, the cost per kilogram of that material is far less than at the end. So what we would do is we would divide up our process into several pieces, and we would it's called outsourcing. So we would send that proprietary secret recipe to another chemical company to have them make that powder for us, make that one compound. And of course, there are all sorts of legal agreements for confidentiality and purchasing involved in that activity. So then if you have 2 or 3 different pieces that come in, then once we get all those pieces, then at Merck, we would combine all those pieces and make the final product. So that's what you were referring to earlier, Dion, and that is called outsourcing. And for about 8 years during the second phase of my career, I was a technical coordinator for outsourcing. I was the person between the chemist at Merck who knew how things were supposed to run, what it was supposed to look like. Was it supposed to turn yellow? No, it's really not. It's supposed to stay white. And the people making the drug in typically other companies such as China, India, and Europe is mostly where we sent our processes for outsourcing. And so I was the go-between between the two parties. So it was very helpful to have a knowledge of chemistry, a knowledge of processing equipment, so that I could translate between the chemist and the engineer in China, India, or Europe. So that was a role that was based on the foundation of understanding how plants work, understanding how plants are designed, because I was a process engineer designing plants for many years, and and the chemistry that's needed to do that. One thing that I was very able to do was to walk into a potential supplier's plant in China, India, or Europe. And if they say, we can do all of these special things, I could look at the equipment because I designed it for so many years. We could look at the equipment and say, but it's not designed to do that. How are you going to be able to do that? So that was one very unique value that I was able to bring to my company. And with that, I had a lot of opportunity to travel throughout Europe, into China, and India to look at plants and to determine whether that was a company that we would want to do business with or not. So that is another type of a business support role where you're not in the lab, you're not in a laboratory working like you do in chem lab, mixing chemicals together. You're not on the plant floor. You're not working in the tanks and the pumps, but you still are using your engineering knowledge to support the business. That is one of the business support roles that sort of takes the foundation that you've created when you were the plant engineer, when you were the process engineer, and expands it into something a little more tactical and nebulous. So that's sort of this, that can be a second phase of your career. Other opportunities that you can work on are even less technical. If you don't decide you don't like the technical, supply chain. As we had mentioned, there are many different places from which we source our materials in order to make our final product. That is called a supply chain. How does everything interconnect? And how do we make sure that this company that makes this makes it in time to ship it to us so that we have it when we need it to use it? And along those lines with the shipping comes logistics. There's a lot of logistics with shipping hazardous materials. Most of these are hazardous materials. What sort of paperwork do you need and documentation do you need, and what sort of testing do you need to do on these materials in order to put them on an airplane? Like lithium batteries explode on airplanes. These hazardous materials are carried on passenger jets. So we need to be able to document that they are safe enough to travel on a jet. These are the kinds of things that you can do as a second tier of your career once you've built a foundation as a plant process and functional specialist.
Okay, well, Joni, we've had a question from Sambit, and he asked, are there any thermal engineering related jobs in this type of industry?
I'm sorry, what type? Thermal?
Thermal engineering.
I think I would need a clarification on what thermal engineering means.
So Sambit, if you want to put clarification. Great. Okay, good. So does that cover off that phase of your career?
Well, the other thing that you can do, and this is sort of the trajectory that I am in right now, is another great opportunity is just plain old project management. And that's where, if you're an initiative lead, if you can put the slide up with the second one with the initiative lead, that's purely project management. That skill is one that you developed when you're doing process engineering, because you need to make sure you need to manage your suppliers who are making your equipment, that they have it delivered in time that you can build your building. So, an initiative lead, a lot of what you do, it starts with project management and being able to get a team. As I like to say, we need to get everybody in the boat rowing in the same direction, right? Make sure everybody's aligned, know what you're doing, when you have to do it by, and then push and shovel everybody along as you need to. So, and then project management doesn't just need to be technical. It can be any type of project. It could be building a building. It could be designing a software system. So, project management is another opportunity that is available at a large company such as Merck, where you can, perhaps not be quite so chemically technical if that's what you want to do. So that's like a second tier after you've, because they don't teach you project management in college. At least they didn't way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth and I was in school. But there was a skill that was developed in that first 1 to 10 years that then you carry into your next phase of your career. And it also was very helpful with this outsourcing role that I was in, being able to make sure that the suppliers are going to be delivering on time. You have to be able to set up a project and be able to track progress. So Dion, I mean, I think those are a lot of your second phase type opportunities.
And that's why we connect with a helicopter, a large scale helicopter there. Extra points go to people who could identify exactly what that the make and model of that helicopter in the chat box. In the meantime, in the chat box, Sambit and Sherry have been clarifying what they mean about the thermal engineering, and Sambit was explaining that it's a field of mechanical engineering, and Cheryl has been saying, well, perhaps think about what role does heat transfer or thermodynamics apply to the production of pharmaceuticals. I'm sure you've still got to have mechanical engineers in a pharma
chemical
plant.
Engineers do take heat and mass transfer classes, heat and mass transfer classes, as well as I had 2 semesters of thermodynamics, 2 semesters of physical chemistry. So that is all part of chemical engineering. There is a lot of opportunity in safety engineering for which you might want to consider thermodynamics, because that's what causes explosions. And guess what? That's what we don't want in plants. We like to keep everything in the tank where it belongs, not exploding everywhere. And so there are ways of calculating reaction kinetics to prevent explosions. So type of thermal, as well as if the pressure does build, how do you quickly relieve it? There are certain pieces of equipment that we put on tanks to quickly relieve overpressurization scenarios. So yes, there are lots of thermal engineering opportunities. Like a safety valve sizing engineer is someone who actually determines how big does this piece of equipment on the tank need to be to relieve the overpressure very quickly, as I was speaking to.
Great, good. So would you say that covers that mid phase of your
I would say so.
Okay. So then you're now into product or project development and strategy.
Yeah, there's a lot of and that builds on if the first phase was you're building your foundation, your second is applying your foundation in a tactical manner. The third phase of your career can be applying the tactical phase as in being more strategic and thinking more strategic. And that's a very hard thing. And as I've been working with engineers and people who have reported to me throughout the latter phases of my career, it's a tough thing to make a transition from a tactical to a strategic thinking. And so strategic thinking is not just what do I need to do now, but how does this set me up for the future? What does the future look like? Who else needs to be involved in helping determine what the future looks like? How do I get other people involved, other experts involved in what I'm doing? And right now, the role that I'm in, I made a big jump a couple of years ago from being involved in making the powders and the pills to actually working with the teams that develop the clinical trials for our drugs. And all of the different considerations around a clinical trial. Clinical trials are very expensive. They cost hundreds of millions of dollars to run each trial, and you need several of them for one drug. So we want to make sure that our money is spent very effectively, and just being able to take the project management that you build from working in your foundation into your initiative lead roles, and then into this role, and getting everybody in the boat rowing in the same direction, making sure everybody's thinking about everybody else is sort of another strategic role. There is absolutely no chemistry involved, very little chemistry involved in it. It's really a lot of people interactions and people skills that you develop over the course of your career. Like, how do you get people to do things they don't want to do? How do you get them to show up to meetings when they think there's not a value add to them? Those are the types of skills that you will be developing as you move through your career in order to be more strategic and to provide more strategic direction to the company. Dion, I know that that's a little vague, and I'm not quite sure how I can tighten it up a little bit and make it clear to everyone.
I mean, for the audience we're talking to today, I think that's absolutely, you've covered it to the level that we need to be covering it. I want to say a bit of apology to the guys and gals down in Cornwall who missed the start of this session because of the technology challenges we had. This will be available to watch on demand. So Joni talked lots earlier. I'm going to show you quickly about different parts of her career, particularly the early phases of her career, like being a plant engineer, a process engineer, all the other roles, like different functional support roles. Do go back, watch it on demand. You'll be able to cover all of this then, and you can still interact. You can still ask us questions in that, in the chat box there as well. So Joni, thank you so much for that view of your career. Now, there are many other elements that I think is worth covering. One of those is the fact that you've chosen to, and you targeted this particular company, and you've chosen to stay with Merck for your entire career. Some people love the idea of a career for life. Some people hate the idea of a career for life. And there are different, advantages and disadvantages, different perspectives. Can you share your perspective of how it's been so advantageous for you to work for Merck for the whole of your career?
Sure. So when I joined Merck in 1989, they were the most admired corporation in America for 7 years in a row. So it was kind of a no-brainer. Like, why wouldn't I want to join a company like that? And it has proven to have a lot of advantages. One of the biggest advantages that I can say is look across the slide with the career. All of these roles are available in one company. So even if you're in a smaller company, you're probably just focused on something very technical, or if you're with a consulting firm, you're doing the initiative lead work as a consultant. But by working for a larger company, you're able to see a broad range of experiences, and you have opportunities to move around within the company and to sort of work your career to what suits you. I got bored of chemistry. I got bored of crawling around in pipes. So I went into more office-based things. So you can do that, where if you're in a company, a smaller company, there's not that lateral opportunity, as well as there's not as much of an opportunity to move up, because you have one guy that leads all of chemistry, let's say, where at a company like Merck, there's 5 guys. So any one of those moves along, you have the opportunity to move up, where otherwise you're waiting for your boss to leave in order to take his or her job. So that is an advantage of a large company. As I had mentioned at the beginning, a lot of the training opportunities are there that you can tap into. I had said I was a certified Toastmaster. So having the opportunity to attend a certified Toastmasters, a CTM course, I did it because they gave you free lunch. Okay, that was it. But it's really worked out well. And if you have the desire, I am also a project management professional through PMI.org, and that was all covered by the company. It was all encouraged by the company. To take the test and to pass the exam to become a PMP. So these are the kinds of opportunities that are available at large companies. In addition to the benefits and accruing 6 weeks of vacation. Yeah, that's all great, but there's a lot of career opportunities as well.
Great. I'm sorry, Joni. I've reported that Arlene says she's lost audio, and I'm not sure whether anyone else has lost audio.
Oh. Arlene, I'll fill you in the next time we go out for dinner.
I'm hoping that it's isolated to Arlene. Okay. If it isn't isolated to Arlene, I do encourage everybody to comment in the chat box, and we'll investigate the tech issues. Okay, so let's moving on now. Bridget asked earlier about your experience of being a woman in engineering. Can you share with us how how it's been over the course of your career, and
So
what advice you can give as well?
I have seen some great changes over the course of my career. It's like, wow, look at all these women. There are lots and lots of women. Um, so I am really impressed with the numbers of women that I've seen coming in. It's 50-50 in some of the departments, and some of the more technical departments in the chemical engineering design department, where they scale up processes. Like they get the instructions to make this much of it, and they learn how to make this much of it. Think about adding 12 cups of flour into a mixer versus 2 cups of flour into a mixer when you're making a cake. It used to be all men, and now it's at least 50% women. So women, you guys have been doing great. You've been taking on the challenge and been very successful at it. And it's great to see a lot of women involved. Women are also being, I know at Merck, there is a great desire for the diversity of women and all types of diversity and inclusion within the company. And I think it's really made all of us very, much richer in our development and in our team and in our work.
Okay, that's interesting to hear, because we've had a few other women engineers, and we've had other people who've commented on the chat box recently, and it's positive to hear that the pharma has got such a good balance, because I'm not sure that balance is represented across all industries of engineering. So that's great to hear. Anybody's got any experience or any thoughts, then do put those in the chat box. We're not going to dwell on it too much, but do pop them in the chat box there if you have got any comments. So while we wait for anybody to add their comments or someone up the courage to share any experiences, I'd like, Joni, have you got any particular takeaway tips, thoughts of inspiration for the young aspirational engineer out there? Maybe they've just started their career in chemical engineering, maybe they're studying a chemical engineering course at college or university, or maybe they're a school kid and they're thinking about, this might be where I want to go in the future.
Yeah.
Is this a growing industry? And what would you encourage them to do if they want to go into it?
So first of all, do it, right? Engineers, as I said in the beginning, engineering is an approach to problem solving. And you would be surprised how the approach that you learn in school applies so broadly throughout your life, and not even just for your career. When you're at home and you're trying to figure out how to do something, how to fix something, it applies even there. And as I had said, that engineering is broad. It gives you a great foundation at school for being able to apply knowledge that you gain in industry, and it gives you the opportunity to move into many different areas. You don't have to do chemical process design. You don't have to do plant design, plant build. You don't have to do engineering floor support. Just having an engineering degree allows you to go into consulting. It allows you to go into, as I had said, supply chain. It allows you to see logistics designs. So there's a lot of opportunity outside of the technical part of what you learn in engineering. So I would definitely recommend engineering as a career. I know a lot of colleges are now offering these integrated business and engineering programs. They weren't available when I was in school, and they are very fascinating to me. So I would encourage anyone who is entering to college to investigate the opportunity of the IBE, the integrated business and engineering degrees. Set your foundation, build your network. Having a network of people that you can always tap into is amazing. Being 30 years in the company, I can pick up a phone and call somebody who is very high up, who hey, remember when we were sitting on the plane that almost crashed together, right? And to have those kinds of connections from when you were down in the trenches during your first 1 to 10 years is very beneficial. So build a network, don't burn bridges. I'm sure you wouldn't. But value your network and use your network, and don't be shy to call somebody and say, hey, can you give me a recommendation? I'm applying for this role in this other department. And I think if you talk to the manager, it would be really helpful.
Joni, we've got a question from Manasai. He said, or she, sorry, do you have any advice for graduating chemical engineering students hoping to work in the industry, tips for interviews, or what might be expected of them?
So yeah, the biggest interview tip that I can give you is when you're asked a question, have you ever have you ever been on a team where you couldn't get everybody to agree? Instead of giving a vague answer saying, yes, we had this problem, be very specific. Say what the problem was, what you did, and what the solution was. Be very specific about your contributions to solving a problem, because that is what really sticks with people. Be very, interviews are kind of all about you. Make sure you show that you understand what the company does, what you understand what the job does. And if you don't be shy to ask questions to clarify the responsibilities of the role. Because when you're in an interview, an interviewer is looking for a good match between what the role is and what you want to do and what you can do. And making sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into, so to speak, is very comforting to the interviewer. Like, oh, this person understands the role and they can do it. So those would be a couple of good tips.
Okay, brilliant. Now, Oliver's made a few comments. Oliver's advised looking at Flixborough Nitro incident in the UK for where mechanical engineers are involved. So Sambi, if you want to look at that. Oliver's also got a question or a comment. He says, I personally, as a chemical engineering student, am not the most technically skilled in the subject, but thrive in leadership roles. Have you any advice for moving into leadership, management, executive roles?
I did not.
Were you the same then? You weren't technically strong, or?
I wasn't specifically technically strong. What I had was really good project management and a really good attention to detail and really good people skills. And that's what really advanced my career, taking accountability and ownership for things. I never had a desire to be an executive. And I only had people report to me when I never wanted people to report to me. But when people report to me, of course, I would embrace them as much as possible. And I enjoyed having people report to me. So that's not been really a goal of my career. So I'm not the best person to ask.
Okay.
To ask for that kind of advice. I'm just a happy little change worker. I'm just very happy, just moving along. So
anybody else who's watching this, who's been, who's done chemical engineering and is thinking about moving into leadership or management, etc., please do, comment in the chat box, comment in the other box, reach out to Oliver. Oliver, if you've got specific details, if you've got a LinkedIn profile or details of what university or college that you're at, then do put your details in there. Take this as an opportunity, and we can see if we can find somebody that can give you some guidance on that. It may be actually, Oliver, that you look back on a couple of our other Drive Lives. They're not chemical engineering, but we've got a few people in there who've pursued their career, taken it away from being technical and moved into more consultancy roles. We had Charlotte Callahan. She was the first one we did in September. Charlotte started out in quite a technical role. She quickly realized that actually being a petroleum engineer on an oil rig wasn't really what she wanted to do. And she wanted to work with people. She wanted to problem solve that way. So she moved into management consultancy. And part of that is she sought out a careers coach. And he totally helped her shift the way she did her CV, pitch herself a different way. But she had that base knowledge of being a petroleum engineer, being out on the oil rigs and, you know, crawling along pipes and things like that. And she was able to use that as a management consultant, deliver extra value later on. So, Oliver, I think if you go and check out the Charlotte Callahan first post on the Drive Live Engineer playlist, watch that one. Also, Kirsten Penton, she's a manufacturing engineer. We interviewed her in December, and she's moved up from being a very technical manufacturing engineer through the ranks, and she really had to work hard to get recognition in different industries. And she's now much more into a consultative problem-solving role, and that's more of a leadership role, again, that I think you might find useful to watch. Again, it's not chemical engineering, but it's still engineering, and there's still many similarities that I think you could gain value from watching. All right, any more tips, Joni, for us today? Any last bits of inspiration? Or are you all inspired out?
No, I mean, as you were speaking, Dion, you know, what really was resonating with me is you need to set your foundation in your first 10 years. You need to understand your industry. You need to understand what your industry does and how they do it and why they do it in order to be successful throughout the rest of your career as you move up. You know, the people that you can kind of tell the people who know how their industry works and what's important as they move up, and those who bypass doing the hard work and spending time on the floor and knowing the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, I think from looking at the other one, speaking to the other people that we've interviewed, they've certainly gained an immediate respect from their peers for, you know, for the hard work, from getting their hands dirty in the early days, so they can really connect with individuals. I mean, you have to do that, don't get me wrong, but I think it's important to think that that's not wasted time. You know, that's where your career path's taking. It's not wasted time in your overall goal. It's a really, really valuable part of progressing your engineering career in management or whatever. So Oliver, great. Oliver has put his LinkedIn profile in the chat box.
Awesome,
So that
Oliver.
anybody who can help Oliver, and this is fantastic. Oliver has just given us a great example of what you need to be doing. Reach out to people, and people will come and help. And we'll make sure that we do find people. Joni, maybe you have some people at Merck that might be able to get in contact with Oliver and give him some advice. That would be just awesome if you could find somebody there. That would be fantastic. Brilliant. Well, I think that about wraps us up for the Drive Live today. With you've gone from your forklift truck in the first 1 to 10 years to your helicopter. Nobody has told me what helicopter this is. I'm a little bit disappointed, but never mind. If you do think back and find out what helicopter that is, do put it in the chat box. And then you connect yourself in the final bit of your career to a Le Mans. Now, I know that this is not a Le Mans car. I wasn't able to find one in time today. But that's just a metaphorical representation of your career. Joni, thank you so much for this.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I've got one last question. Okay. One last question that my boss gave me, actually. He rang me up just before we went live with this. And said, this is from John Chicken. And his question was, thinking about coronavirus and the vaccines, what kind of challenges are chemical engineers facing in terms of scaling up for mass production of the vaccine and doing that quickly?
Oh, John. So I'm not a vaccine engineer. It is. I haven't worked in vaccines, so I don't understand a lot of the groundwork for that. But you know, again, you know, the challenges are all the same of the biggest challenge is making the drugs for clinical trials. That's one big challenge, is making a quantity for clinical trials quickly, because you're getting a recipe to make this much, and they need you to make this much tomorrow, and you don't know. And the recipe is not optimized. You have to optimize the recipe, and so you're just to brute forcing this recipe, making, instead of making 1 10 batch, you make 10 small batches, because that's all works. And so it's a lot of making the drugs for clinical trials that is a very difficult part, and everything's happening all at the same time, and trying to manage the flexibility of change, and to be flexible to change, and take changes in order to keep things moving forward as quickly as possible. It's really,
so you're probably having to readapt your processes all the time as you get feedback from the field.
correct.
So it must be an immensely pressured time period as you're taking into all these parameters, feeding them down into the production and manufacturing process.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
And then, I guess, so you'd probably have to use different plant facilities. You're saying you're having to make small batches because that's a more reliable way of doing things. Small batches, lots of small batches rather
Lots
than
of small batches.
and then you've got to make it, and then you've got to make the transition to this big batch production.
Right.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much again. Thank you, everybody who's joined us today. We've had lots of interaction. I'm so pleased that we've actually had chemical engineering students joining us today and asking questions too. We are back again in 2 weeks' time. We have another guest on Drive Live with an Engineer at the same time. Do check out the playlist, look at the videos coming up. If you click the reminder bell, you will get a notification of when we go live so that you can join those. All of the Drive Live with an Engineer sessions are available on demand afterwards, so you can go back and watch those, share them with your friends and your colleagues, etc., so that they can get some value from this as well. Thanks so much, Joni. I look forward to catching you,
everybody,
again in the future. It's been a fascinating discussion, and I wish you a fantastic 2021.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day, everybody.
Goodbye.